Besem Ab Weld Wema Fescadus Adawam like Amin. Besem Ab Weld Wema Fescadus Adawam like Amin. Besem Ab Weld Wema Fescadus Adawam like Amin. Give thanks, blessed love. Good morning, Melka Medil. Good morning. So we're in the middle of the book of Exodus with the battle of wills, as it were, between God and Moses against Pharaoh and his servants, because they're trying to free the people of Israel and Pharaoh's resistance to that promise. So on with the reading, Exodus chapter 10. Give thanks for these few words. Yahweh said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and it's the heart of his servants, that I may show these my signs amongst them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your son's son what things I have done to Egypt, and my signs which I have done amongst them, that you may know that I am Yahweh." Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, said. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else, if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country, and they shall cover the surface of the earth, so that one won't be able to see the earth. They shall eat the residue of that which has escaped, which remains to you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which grows for you out of the field. Your houses shall be filled, and the houses of all your servants, and all the houses of all the Egyptians, as neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were on earth to this day." He turned and went out to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve Yahweh their God. Don't you know that Egypt is destroyed?" Moses and Aaron were brought again to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go serve Yahweh your God. But who are those who will go?" Moses said, "We will go with our young and with our old. We will go with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks with our herds. For you must hold a feast to Yahweh." For we must hold a feast to Yahweh. Apologies. He said to them, "Yahweh be with you, and I will let you go with your little ones. See, evil is clearly before your faces. Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve Yahweh, for that is what you desire." Then they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they come up and on the land of Egypt, and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail has left." Moses stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt, and Yahweh went and brought an east wind on the land all that day and all night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. The locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested in all the borders of Egypt. They were very grievous. Before them there was no such locust as they, nor will there ever will be again. For they covered the surface of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they ate every herb of the land, and all the fruits of the trees which the hail had left. They remained nothing green, either tree or herb or field, through all the land of Egypt. The Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste, and he said, "I have sinned against Yahweh your God, and against you. Now therefore please forgive my sin again, and pray to Yahweh your God, that he may also take away from me this death." Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to Yahweh. Yahweh sent an exceedingly strong west wind, which took up the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the borders of Egypt. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he didn't let the children of Israel go. Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards the sky, that there may be darkened over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt." Moses stretched out his hand towards the sky, and there was a thick darkness in all the land for these 3 days. And they didn't see one another, and nobody rose from his place for these 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. Pharaoh called to Moses and said, "Go serve Yahweh. Only let your flocks of your herd stay behind. Let our little ones also go with you. Let your little ones also go with you." Moses said, "You must also give into the land our hand sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God. Our livestock also shall go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind. For of it we must take to serve Yahweh our God." And we didn't know with what we must serve Yahweh until we come from there. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he wouldn't let them go. Pharaoh said to them, "Get away from me. Be careful to see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses said, "You have spoken well. I will see your face again no more." Give thanks, blessed love. Yet a breath for cure. So on with the tussle, and as it goes on, and I'll be honest with you, I wish I could, in a way, I know I'm reading these a chapter a day, but in a way, these I'm finding these chapters quite painful to read and reflecting on, and I kind of wish I could read them all in one go, and then we could get beyond it, because they are difficult to read. The people of Israel are really suffering in enslavement, and also the people of Egypt are really suffering with all these plagues coming forth. And what we're getting is a real battle of will and power between God and Pharaoh. And I think the difficult ones, and I'm going to be really honest here, is this phrase, Yahweh hardened the Pharaoh's heart, and then he didn't let the people go. Do you know what I mean? And I know this is a very difficult phrase that's repeated over and over again in these chapters. And I also know that it's kept theologians up at night, trying to study and seeing what those phrases actually mean. Different interpretations of it is that actually Pharaoh was working under free will. The enslavement of the Israelites happened before Moses was born and before this particular Pharaoh. So God isn't responsible for the enslavement of the Israelites. And Pharaoh himself was working under self-interest when he continued with the enslavement and made the enslavement harder and more extreme. So one of the interpretations is actually that Pharaoh's working under his own free will, and God hardening his heart isn't to keep the people enslaved. It's actually for Pharaoh to see good and bad from his own volition. Because if he was freeing the Israelites just through fair force alone, then it wouldn't be his own free will. So what he's trying to get Pharaoh to do is to see that he needs to make that stand from his own free will standpoint. So God is punishing Pharaoh for his own stubbornness rather than causing his stubbornness. And the I guess the more harsh interpretation is that God is hardening his heart to prove his might and to prove his power over all of the earth. But the flip interpretation of that is that God is using Pharaoh's stubbornness to prove his might. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword and a very, complex kind of, and I don't know where I stand with it, but I do know that it's quite upsetting to read and to explore. And I think it's kind of accepted within theology that the God of the Old Testament and how God is represented and explored is different to the God of the New Testament, where the God of the Old Testament they say is a jealous God and a very strict God, where in the New Testament God's kind of represented in much more kind of caring for his people, if you like, and bringing Jesus to humankind to take away those sins, and God becomes less directly interventionist, etc. So the Old Testament seen as God establishing his presence on the earth for all of the world to see. And then in the New Testament, that promise is fulfilled, and then people shall be saved through Jesus Christos. I think the other difficult chapter that I've always found difficult to read is the book of Job. Because again, in the book of Job, we'll get to that whenever we get to it. But in the book of Job, we have, God and the devil basically using Job as an example and bringing plagues on Job and seeing if he remains faithful. And again, it's a very difficult read. The Bible isn't an easy read for any stretch, and I won't try and sanitize it really. And I think this is why over the many centuries and thousands of years, this book has remained powerful and mysterious and intriguing and controversial, because there's a lot in here. I'm just reading a chapter each day. And in one chapter, we've got a whole book, a whole narrative, a whole theology, a whole philosophy, and many more in one chapter, let alone this whole book, So yeah, and we have these wrestles with our faith and with God and trying to understand it. Naphtali, my middle name, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, as we explored in Genesis, the name Naphtali means wrestling with God. So yeah, and we have to come at this with an honest transparency. Otherwise, what are we doing in terms of blind faithfulness and not questioning anything, not trying to understand things? And it's not our place to maybe understand the mind of God. That's not what I'm saying. But actually to become confident with our faith, to become confident with our narrative, and is to explore all the thorny different parts of that and not pretend that they don't exist. And I think this is where some of us have problems with religion, when everything's glossy and rosy and there's no questions and it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. Actually, it's human condition to question and to have doubt and to and to try to kind of question things and to reconcile things. Everyone comes at faith differently, but when you come at it with a full heart and your full question and your full openness and your full transparency, and you still believe through that process, I guess that's the example of Job, that he still remained faithful even after going through all those tribulations. So I'll end it here. But blessed love, give thanks for this day, give thanks for the opportunity of this day, and God willing, see you tomorrow. Give thanks. Blessed love.